Okay,
Okay.
Phil, it's all yours.
Clear my throat here. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this January 2022. Yes, the new year. General meeting of the Mike and Key Amateur Radio Club. And to start the meeting, we'll be going ahead with our presentation. And to do that, we'll hand it off to our activities manager, Jason.
Great, thanks, Phil. Good morning, everybody. Let's see. Today we've got, as I scroll up my, hold on a sec. Sorry about that, guys. So today we have our own David W7DAO will be presenting on MCOM. A little blurb from his presentation, which we'll get going here in a sec. The MCOM journey doesn't start with radios. It starts with disaster preparedness. If the material hits the fan, are you and your family ready to survive? This talk will be less a list of things to have, but more the elements to consider when planning and the key things people often don't think about. To do our community MCOM duties, you need to know your loved ones are safe while you are gone and trying to help others. All right, David, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, actually, hold on, I gotta stop sharing. I shared the wrong screen. Hold on, stop share. Share screen one, there we go. Okay, well, first, thanks for letting me do the talk today. Normally, I've been doing this last year and a half from COVID. I've been doing a number of technical talks to various radio clubs around the state, but haven't done this talk in probably 18 years. Last time I did it was on a radio show. So it was fun to come back to this after a long duration of being quiet. So it was a nice opportunity for me. So the bottom line here is, as you can see, disaster preparedness, life favors the prepared. So obviously the converse of that is telling. If you're not prepared, you'll have less chance of surviving. I won't go into details of my background, but if you want to afterwards and see all the X things that I've done, from EMT instructor to, current member of the Red Cross and things like that, feel free to peruse it, but to save time, I won't go there. This is why I kind of have a background, a connection to mass care and to mass casualty incidents and disaster preparedness. Just a plug, there are two new special interest groups that are on our group. One is the MCOM group and one is the disaster preparedness group. So check them out and become members if you're interested and contribute to them. Everyone has experiences that they can contribute. The major point, and this was in the summary I said, is that MCOM is the last consideration on a list of items related to post-event activities. And this is really important because we can sometimes spend way too much time getting our go kits ready and not enough time getting things ready for survival. And so before you even think about going to an MCOM agency or contributing to it after an event, you got to think about these obvious things. And I'm sure all of you have thought about them. Am I safe? Is the family safe? And if I have to go to an agency to do the work, is it travel safe? And until those are secured, you're not in a position to really do an MCOM activity. And that's important to keep in mind. So think about both the radio side, but more importantly, think about the preparedness side for your safety and your family safety first. And I'm sure you've all done that. The key thing to think about is, and I, coming from a medical background originally as an EMT and working in those areas, the word homeostasis is very important, which is how does the body, or in this case, you, your family, your community, create a fairly stable condition necessary for survival? How do you have resiliency during a time when the equilibrium has been upset to return back to a normal balance, or to at least a survival balance? Those are the things that a preparedness strategy is all about, returning back to a sense of stability that you can survive from. May not be to the lifestyle that you have before the event, but at least during the initial aftermath of the event is returning back to a safe condition where you and your family can survive successfully. That is what preparedness and your community is all about. But one of the things that I've learned is that when you come to survival, when you come to emergency preparedness, you get 3 psychological benefits. One is empowerment, the other is independence, and of course, confidence. This I've learned by teaching a lot of first aid and other classes is people often feel like they don't know what to do. And in that confusion of not knowing what to do, they don't feel they become dependent. They become more of a victim. They don't feel that they have any power. When people start learning and doing this stuff, they become more empowered, independent, and confident. You know, one of the things that as a responder that I've always had noticed is, you know, walking into a family situation where there's a medical situation of one of the people, and all the family members are standing around that person, but no one's doing anything. And the reason is because they never took the time to learn even basic first aid, and they feel very impotent in those situations, and also feel that they should have done something in those situations. And so having some basic training gives you that feeling of empowerment, independence, and confidence. And that's really important, because when you're in an emergency situation and responding, that confidence gives you the ability to see a new problem and work it, rather than just basically, you know, retreating from it and not knowing what to do. Preparedness, of course, is a continuum, and a lot of you guys have heard, because we live in an earthquake area, a lot about preparedness. So I don't want to spend a lot of time going into things that are pretty obvious, but the thing that you want to consider is from an individual, preparedness is a continuum from individual disaster to, you know, just to be, you know, have fun, alien invasion or takeover by machines. But specifically, most of preparedness is about things around home survival. But when you think about it, especially if you live, let's say, in a wildfire situation, wildfire areas, where do you may have to get out of where you are at home, go to a temporary shelter, or what I call a temporary retreat, which is beyond the sheltering area into a different geographical area to retreat from something that's big enough. You may have to go into a long-term shelter, which is what happened with Katrina and Sandy, is people spent almost a year or so, some people in trailers from FEMA, not very good trailers, by the way, from FEMA to get long-term shelters. And some of those people went to permanent relocation. They did not return to those areas. And then I do have collapse of society at the far end, and there are people who prepare for that, but understand what different degrees of collapse in society means. So for example, if you live in the city of Seattle like I do, and there's no power or water for 5, 6, 7, 8 days in a bad disaster, what is society doing around you during that time? So you have to consider not just the, you know, complete alien invasion and takeover by machines on one side, but is there a short-term collapse of society that you need to protect yourself for, or potentially get out of town for because you don't want to be around for it? The other thing to always consider is we talk a lot about preparedness about the home, but it's really more dimensional than that. It's preparedness survival for your vehicle, for your office. For example, those people in Virginia who were trapped for like a day during a snowstorm on their freeway, what did they do? Well, I lived for about 11 years in upstate New York and New England, and I can tell you that that wouldn't be a big problem for most people in those areas, because we're so used to snow that if we're, you know, not as, if we are traveling during those times of year and we're going to get hit in it, and we decide to travel during a potential blizzard, almost everyone's told and carries a blanket, water, some food. So if your car gets stuck, you can survive until the plows come to get you out. So you have to think of those other areas, and especially a vehicle, because you may be somewhere where you cannot get home for a few hours or a day. How are you going to survive from your vehicle? You're going to be in your office. When we go back to working out of offices, how are you going to survive if you cannot get out of your parking lot, so to speak, or get back to mass transit, or for whatever reason, get back to home for at least 12 hours or so? How are you going to survive that location? The other item is what I call centers. How are you going to survive at the center? And centers, I mean houses of worship or regular gathering places like senior centers. What is your role of your church, of your synagogue, of your mosque with regards to disaster preparedness for things happening when people are in those buildings, as well as for supporting their communities when something does happen? For most of us who are not at home, or even at home, the immediate goal is check on the family and get home. Those are what people are usually thinking about when they're not at home. And of course, checking on the family is difficult in these situations because we know cell phone towers are going to be at least inundated with so much traffic that they've shut down. They can't handle the traffic. And this happened during the Nisqually quake right up here a number of years ago, where for about 2 hours, you couldn't get a cell phone call through. And as you know, many people now don't even have landlines. So there has to be a different way to find a way to contact family, because that's one of the major sources of tension, is not knowing where people are, who your friends and family, what their life status is. Now, the order of precedence, as you all know, for disaster is self, family, neighbors, community or organizations, and then nation. And this order of precedence is really important because you're not going to do anyone any good if you are trying to take care of your family and you've got basically, you're bleeding out of your arm and you haven't taken care of it. I mean, just to be a little ridiculous when I say it, but it's really important. Have I taken care of myself so I can take care of others? How have I banded together with my neighbors so that we can protect each other and support each other during these disasters? How am I supporting my community if that's a choice I want to make, or organizations, and of course, nation, all depending on the size of the disaster that you're talking about. And then on the self level or on the family level, these are the things that you need to consider. What's the emergent health situation? Do I need to do an emergency egress or exit? So if you're in a structure that's not in a good shape, you got to do an emergency egress before you do anything else. If you're in a situation where you're bleeding, you need to do something about that emergently. So get rid of the emergent problems as fast as possible. Then you can think about, okay, what do I need to think about? Is the air pure? You think, well, why am I worried about that? Well, if you go back far enough, again, you have to look at different types of disasters. If you live near an industrial area like the people in Bhopal, India did, they wiped out a whole neighborhood because of a chlorine leak, if I remember. So again, think about where you are, and if pure air is an issue or a potential that you're going to get an industrial exposure, for example, you need to think about that. Or you're in a fire situation, you have to worry about air. Your safety, which is next, clean water, shelter, food, and communications. Kind of an order of life-sustaining precedence there to think about. Have I prepared for all of these things to be available for me as I need them? Notice that communications is down at the bottom, because from a life-threatening point of view, that's the last thing you need to think about. Now, speaking of pure air, here's some things to think about. Now, on the far left, very few of you ever have a 1-hour emergency escape hood. You'll find a lot of these, they're basically on aircraft. You'll see the flight attendants and the flight crew have escape hoods that they can put on, because one, they have to be able to help people out of the situation. So they have these escape hoods, but you can buy an escape hood. They're about $50, the cheaper ones if you want to. If you're in a situation where you're worried about that, yeah, go ahead and get it. Personally, I don't have one because I've decided that where I live and how I live, I can pretty much get out of my house, for example, if there's a fire pretty easily without having to worry about that. But if you live in an apartment complex and you have a long way to the exit door and you don't know what the condition is going to be to get to that exit door or another one, you may think, do I want to get an emergency escape hood? So think about your own personal situation and what you want. The next one I do have, my wife and I have, is an industrial particulate volatile organic compound and other contaminant respirator. We have those couple of reasons. One, I used to work in industrial environments, so I always had one anyway. But the next is my wife has asthma. And if you're in a wildfire smoke condition, even as bad as we've had a couple of years ago here, it can bother her and she may have to wear these to go outside. And of course, we're all familiar with the N95 masks, and making sure that they have a good seal, et cetera, is important. But these are all things that you need to think about. Do I need these for my safety? The N95 mask today is probably what would be considered a minimal piece of equipment you need to have. I think if you are an asthmatic, and you may want to think about having the middle one as well, so that if there is a really dangerous particulate situation, that you have the ability to go outside, go shopping, and things like that. It will freak people out, but at least you're breathing okay. And you don't have to worry about going to the emergency room. So you have to decide for yourself what's important to what level of preparedness you want. Another thing was speaking about was clean water. And, a lot of people think about bottled water, which is fine. Nothing wrong with bottled water, but there's a limited supply. You're not going to store, for 5 people, you may not want to store all the water you're going to possibly need for 3 to 5 days for 5 people or 4 people, or realize that, you live, most of us live near water. We live near fresh water, Lake Washington, different lakes around here. We are rich in water. I mean, when I used to go backpacking as a kid in Cascades, in the spring, we carried very little water with us. We carried a cup, and we just came, there was always a running stream coming down the hill or the mountain, and we would just put our cup in. I know people go like, oh my God, Giardia and things like that. In those days, we didn't think about it. And most of us, very rarely any of us got it, but we'd put our cups out and have water. And then before we broke into our stored water. But think about these things that you need to have. I do recommend some type of emergency straw. It's really good to have. It's a one-person device. It does a good job of getting water safe enough for you to drink when it's contaminated. And you can drink right out of Lake Washington with it. You can even drink out of some pretty bad puddles with it. I carry the first need reverse osmosis units, part of my backpacking life when I was a backpacker. And then this can support a couple of people easily by producing pure water. And then the other one in the middle is also reverse osmosis units. So decide how much bottled water you need. And for an extended emergency where you think you're going to go beyond those 5 days or 3 days, whatever you're preparing for, you may want to think about these items for at least the reverse osmosis units for your home. But I also recommend for your car, for any type of day hiking, anything that you want, a life straw is part of your emergency kit. It's part of your first aid kit, should be a life straw, and one for each person. So those are things, because water is important. It doesn't take long before you dehydrate and cause problems for yourself. The other things to think about way before you need them is, what skills do you need to acquire? So you need to have knowledge of first aid. And if you can take a standard first aid course, great. If you can get an advanced first aid course, better, because you'll have more skills that you can apply. Don't assume that you're going to be able to get someone to the emergency room in a timely fashion, and they're going to do heavy duty triage. So if you have a simple cut, probably you're going to end up not getting it, treated in the emergency room for a long time, because they have other things they're going to do. So assume you're going to have to do some self-care and care family. Use of common hand tools. I think for most of us who at the average age of this club, this is not a big deal. When you think about people who are going to school today, they didn't get shop classes. They didn't have a lot of do-it-yourself stuff in a lot of people's culture. We grew up, a lot of us, working on our own cars. You don't work on your own car pretty much anymore. It's too complex for that. So you have to think about, do I know about how to use common hand tools? And different cultures, by the way, have different approaches to doing this kind of work. So people should always know how to use common hand tools. How to make a fire. And that is how to make a fire without a match and kerosene or some lighter fluid. At least having a match is fine, but not any reliance on a lighter fluid, at least a commercial lighter fluid. How to just make a fire, just to know that. Like in my emergency kit, I have a fire, I have a magnesium fire stick. I have other things that I carry besides matches for starting a fire. I know a few good knots. You don't have to know the entire litany of I'm ex-Navy, so you don't have to know every possible knot that you can tie as a naval person, but you need to know about 2 or 3 good knots that you can use to secure something. I have one knot that I'm very comfortable with, that if you look closely at anything I do, it's pretty much the same knot over and over again. It's a very good knot. Is it the only knot? Is it the best knot for everything? No, but sometimes I don't keep track of, it's hard for me to remember 50 knots, but it's really easy for me to remember 3 good knots I can use in almost every possible way. So keep that in mind. How to make reasonably safe water. Well, we showed the safe straw, the reverse osmosis units. Can you make a solar still if you needed to do that? Do you know how to distill water if you want to know how to do that? So it depends on how far along the line of making safe water you want to go, including, using the iodine tablets if you want to use that as well. How to prepare safe meals. Now, that kind of sounds really weird to say preparing safe meals. I mean, doesn't everybody know how to pretty much prepare a meal? If you can open a can, right, you can prepare a meal. But I see the word safe here. Do you understand the temperatures involved in storage of food? Do you know that you should not let mayo stand at room temperature in most cases for 3 to 4 hours, beyond 3 to 4 hours, because it's a source of a medium for culture for bacteria? Do you know what the safe temperatures are for cooking How cold should cold be? How warm should warm be to be safe, and for how long? Think about that, because when you no longer have a refrigerator access or no longer have this other access to some of the things you need to consider those things on how to take care of them. And of course, building a basic shelter. You don't have to be able to take out your hand tools and build a house. You got to be able to take out enough hand tools that if you need to build a basic shelter because you don't have one and you need one, that you can throw something together that's going to be reasonably stable for the period of time that you need it. And so those are some of the skills you want to think about before you get to a disaster, to say, do I have these skills? And if I have these skills, then I'm more prepared to survive a situation. Now, the major cost of disaster response, and this is pretty universal from individuals to communities. I was involved in a lot of this, as I said before, and as well as testing out disaster preparedness plans in simulation, real life simulation, not virtual. And so we learned, first off, obviously, if you're not adequately prepared with skills and supplies, you already got a problem. The second is communications. And communications could be as simple as, I'm talking to you in a way that I'm using active communications, where I'm making sure that you understand what I'm saying and you're repeating it back to me. So we have active listening going on. 2, do we have interagency communications, depending on what your level is? One of the things that happened in 9/11 was they did not have interagency communications that was effective in that location. And that caused some of the issues that they dealt with during that response. The other, of course, is you could have the supplies, but if you don't have logistics to get them to the right place, then you have a problem. Well, what do you need for logistics? Good communications. Where do you want it? When do you want it? How do you want it? So even on an individual level, these things can occur. Like if a neighbor is asking for something and you're trying to support the neighborhood, do you have good communications and good logistics? And lastly, security. Are you safe? Are you secure in the situation that you're in? How do we maintain that level of security? So those are the 4 things that you always think about when you're planning this disaster response, from a micro level up to the macro level. And I know, guys, stop me if you have a question, or if you want to make a comment. I know a lot of this is review, but hang with me. So the number one question that I always ask people when they're talking about this is, what kind of disaster are you preparing for? Is it a yearly event like power outages and flooding? Is it an expected situation for your locale like mudslides, earthquakes, or wildfires? Do you live in an area like, let's say, Georgetown? Are you thinking about, or other areas where they're near industrial areas, like in Auburn, there's some industrial sections where nearing residential areas. Are you thinking about gas explosions, collapses of a road from an earthquake, or the release of toxic substances? Are you thinking about events that happens usually once a decade, once a generation, every 100 years, like a pandemic, or once every 6 to 1,000 years, like Mount St. Helens or the big earthquake, but you don't know when it's going to happen? What kind of disasters are you prepare for? After Sandy was in New Orleans, I think it was Sandy, I was at a meeting of a few people, and somebody on a different subject, but just before the meeting started, someone was just talking about how the government killed people in New Orleans because they didn't prepare for that level of an event. And I said, that's not true. I said, what happened was they made a decision. The people of New Orleans, not the government of New Orleans, the people of New Orleans made a decision. They decided not to prepare for the 300-year or 100-year flood. And so there were plans to raise those levees for 30, 40 years the Corps of Engineers had. But the city didn't want to pay for that kind of stuff. The government, the people who are the government, did not want to pay for that stuff. So voters, if you want better preparedness, you've got to vote people in who represent what you want to do. You've got to pay for preparedness. And so what they decided to do was kick the can forward, because obviously if you're thinking about it, something happens every 100 years or more, you could possibly, as a politician, kick that can forward because it could be somebody else's problem and you don't have to deal with it. But somewhere along the time, that clock is ticking. You have to make a decision. And ultimately, it's the people of New Orleans who allowed the situation to happen, who did not prepare themselves properly. But when you look at this list of 1 to 7, all these have something, as I'm alluding to right now, is a cost. If I'm preparing for a power outage, the cost is relatively low. For most power outages that happen in this area, which is most of the time they're going to be for a few hours, sometimes a day. On rare occasions, you might be exhibiting a power outage for a week, which has happened in the that big December storm that we had about 13 years ago. But as you go down the list, the cost becomes higher, and you have to do a cost benefit decision on how well you're going to prepare. So that's the thing. That's really what's going on here is, do you have what kind of disaster do you want to prepare for, and how much are you willing to invest? And that investment is not only also a cost, it's training, and of course it's storage of materials. So let's talk example, planning for a power outage and flooding. What could you lose? What impact will it have on the quality of your life? What would be the typical duration of the event? So I should probably have put 2 and 3 in different orders. What steps are you going to take to prepare? So let's talk about power outage, and just open up the mic here for a minute. What kind of things would you do to prepare for a typical power outage that you would expect? This is the interactive portion of our show.
Backup generator.
Backup generator. Okay, what else?
Battery packs.
Battery packs. Anything else?
Transfer panel built into the house.
If you're going to use a generator, yep, you need a transfer panel.
Solar
Solar backup.
and fuel.
Fuel, right? Fuel.
Food.
Food.
Way to
Go
cook
old
it.
school candles.
Candles. A cooking source, right? Okay, what about a flood? What are the things you would do for a flood?
Sandbags.
Sandbags. That's a your
Raft.
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 Okay.
Boat.
Boat.
Yacht.
Water pumps.
Water pumps.
Water pumps. Yeah.
Okay. Here's one for you. What I would do is make sure that at least all my important papers are in a location that are above the first floor if I have a 2-story house. Right?
Yep.
What do
That's
I
a
do?
good one. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you have to do if you bug out? If the flood makes your house unlivable? And most of the time that it's going to be. What are you going to do? What's your bug out pack going to be like? What do you take? You know, what happens is, you know, people say the flood's coming, they start moving things up. Well, okay, ask yourself the question. Yes, I'm going to move things up,
Where
furniture and things, but what should have been up to begin with? Right?
are you gonna go?
Where are you going to go? Absolutely.
Have a friend, family.
Friend, family. Yep. All those things. And hey, are my emergency supplies again? Where are they relative to where the water's coming? How much warning will I have the water's coming? You know, hey, we just had,
medication,
pardon me, medication, exactly.
medication. If you have a pet, food
Yep.
for the pet, meds
Yep.
for the pet.
Now you can see that just as we're talking here, that this is not something you plan, and it's a trivial thing to do. Hey, we'll do some, all I need is a couple of things. No, you can find that all of a sudden these things start branching out into more complex logistical and supply situations. So again, we've mentioned some of these, but if the power is out, ATMs and banking systems and the internet may be down. How are you going to pay for things? Well, almost all of us are using almost no cash today. Guess what? You're probably going to have to carry some cash with you as part of your preparedness kit. Gas pumps will not work. How are you going to obtain fuel for those generators? If you're on gas or diesel generators or propane generators, or for your car? What if the city water pumps stop working? Where your water's coming from? So those are some of the other things that you need to consider when you're talking about power outage. Well, that's the same things you want to consider if you're in a major earthquake and you've lost everything in a big one for at least 3 to 5 days. So somebody mentioned, I think it was Phil, about battery packs. Here's my Go Camping Bug Out Kit for batteries. I think some of you see me post some of this, but here's a small one that I can give to, you know, a family member that will keep their cell phones charged, or they could run a 110 volt, 100 watt device on for a short period of time. You can see I have a lithium ferrous phosphate battery, 600 working amps, 600 working watts for the AC side, but it'll cover 10 amps on the DC side. And it can be charged by solar as well as conventional ways. The one that's on the right is actually the one I use primarily for running my radios. So it's 2 batteries, 2 15 amp hour batteries. It also has a 400 watt inverter, because I used to go take this and use it also when I'm camping for my CPAP, and it'll run my CPAP, one battery will run my CPAP for the night. And you can see I have a battery switch in there, so I can charge one battery while I'm operating the other battery. And yes, I do have a solar panel to charge it. But as we mentioned, generator, solar, battery. Hey, can you throw out a wind how you're going to generate energy from the wind? Could you do it? There are little devices you can buy now that you can throw into a stream. They're basically small generators you can throw one temporarily into a stream to generate electricity to charge either a cell phone or some small LED pack or small battery pack for like running LED lights. So think about what you're going to do for power and have it ready and keep them charged. I do keep these charged so that they're ready to go whenever I need them. By the way, these two battery packs in the ammo kits stay in my car at all times. So unless I'm charging them, they are in my car at all times, ready to go. It's part of my normal vehicle survival kit. Generators, we already mentioned, we talked about generators for a second, but what are the critical must-have items to power? Because obviously, the more things you power on your house, the more things that you're going to end up, the more money you're going to have to pay for the generator. So, you want to think about the freezer, the refrigerator, some lights. Those are the minimum things you want to think about for powering versus powering the entire house. Switching to LED light bulbs in every fixture will help you save power as well, generator capacity as well. It was mentioned, use a transfer switch wired to local code, very important. Fuel storage. So how much fuel do you need if that generator has to be on are you preparing for a 12-hour power outage or a 3-day power outage? How much fuel do you need to store? And where's the trade-off? If you believe, hey, they're going to have fuel for me, I can go down to the gas station, it's going to be running on some sort of generator or whatever the fact is, think about how much fuel you need to store and how to safely store it. Where the generator should be located. Should it be located inside the house or outside the house? Should it be on wheels? Can it be put into the car easily if I need to bug out and want to take the generator out of it? So where is it going to be located and how, given my neighborhood, and what keeps it from being stolen? How are you not going to have someone walk up and steal your generator when it's sitting mounted outside the house? So all these things by the way, the reason I have not been pushing this forward is I'm reading the wrong screen. So sorry about that. The other thing is to think about is if you're like a lot of us, if you camp, you can survive. Because a lot of the equipment that you need for camping are the equipment you're going to need for survival. You need a shelter. Most of us have tents. This is a picture of, you can see my one of my antenna setups is sitting there on the far right of the screen. But this is my tent when I'm renting a car and going camping in different locations. I have 2 suitcases I carry with me. One is clothes and the other is camping gear. And I land, let's say, in Arizona, Phoenix, and I go on a car camping trip for a week or 2. And this is all my stuff is sitting in one of the suitcases that I can then pull out and camp in. But if I'm at home and I'm camping out of my car, then I have a larger tent that'll have 4 people easily. And when I had my family, it was we had kids at home, I had a 6-person tent. And so you think about all the things you use to go camping are the same things you need to survive. So, but keep in mind, sealable totes are your friends. Pacific Northwest, everything, even if it's in a sealable tote, put it in a plastic bag. Waterproof bags used for boating are great too. So one of the things that we learn in the Pacific Northwest is if it's not waterproof, make it waterproof. And even if it is waterproof, put it in a plastic bag inside anyway, because it's amazing how things get wet. And also, by the way, plastic bags, especially garbage bags, are survival friends. So let me try to tell you. RV or trailer, really nice to have, of course. It's your little house on wheels, so to speak. And boats, of course, some boats can be floating RVs as well. But where is it stored and can you get to it? What emergency supplies do you carry on it? And of course, can you get to it? That's the bottom line. If that storage facility can't be gotten into after hours or when the power is out or whatever, then that RV is not doing you much good until you can get there and get it out. So think about that kind of question when you decide to have the RV as your bug out unit. Plan on cooking. Someone mentioned that. Yep. I have the 2 things on the left are things I have. It's part of my camping equipment. I have a white gas stove, an old Coleman type, and a white gas, what's called a Whisper Light backpacking stove. I have both of these. The Whisper Light backpacking stove is in my car at all times in my 24-hour pack with fuel. And this other stove is part of my emergency gear, which is also my camping gear. So when I go camping, I take this out with me. Why did I choose white gas? Really simple. Propane tank stoves mean that I have to carry a lot of propane with me. That's a lot of canisters taking a volume. a 1 gallon can of white gas goes a long way and takes up less space than the equivalent propane tanks that you have to carry. Hey, there's your Weber grill. Any grill you have in the backyard is a great thing to have. So again, that's your survival stove. Cooking over a fire pit. Here's on the right side are some very cheap and easy ways to make rocket stoves. You can buy these things and if you want them made, but you can also take it's very simple to make on your own. They work very effectively. A nice thing is they burn anything you want to put in there. Anything that'll catch fire, you can put in there and they burn very effectively. Also, if you want, vegetable oil and paper are great fire starters. So instead of having to use chemicals to start the fires, which also leave residues on your food and such, think about, a little bit of vegetable oil on a piece of paper is a great fire starter. Or if you want to have your own paraffin cubes, you can use that as well. But plan on your cooking method. Plan to remember that you may not have access to your house after disaster. So that's the segue to where's the best place to store your survival supplies. Because if they're in a place in your house where if the house is no longer has been compromised, can you get to them? So you got to think about that. Where are they keeping it? Do you have a locked, watertight box on the outside of the house where you keep your disaster supplies? Where do you keep them in your car? Where else can you keep disaster supplies? If you live in an apartment, how are you going to deal with that? So having supplies is one thing. Getting to them is the next thing you have to think about. So always give some conscious thought to where you put them. And it could be a layered response. Some things are here, some things are there, that you can get to them as well. And supply levels. Car, I have a 24, actually it's a 30, I have a 36 hour, because a 24-hour pack and 36-hour pack are no different in the sense that I have more food. And because I have a, I have a minivan and I have plenty of storage space, and I have totes. My 24-hour pack is basically a small backpack, like a rucksack, which carries everything from my stove, water purification gear, rain gear, toiletries, etc., and mess kits and such, and cooking stuff. And then I have one of my totes that carries water and my food. And so I actually have enough food for about 3 days. And I restock whenever I go car camping. I'm rotating stock so I can keep it active. Office could be a 24-hour pack if you have to take mass transit, because you may be stuck in your office for 24 hours. Or if you commute by car, maybe 12-hour pack is all you need, or just leave your 24-hour pack to be the one in the car and just work out of the office from it so you can make a decision. And at home, what's the minimum you want to have? A 5-day pack. I do not recommend a 3-day set of supplies. I recommend a 5-day set of supplies. So minimum 5-day pack. You can go up to a year if you want. It's all up to you on what your cost benefit analysis is and what your comfort level is. Oops. But yeah, go ahead.
Seattle Emergency Management and a number of other agencies now are recommending for the home that you have a 14-day supply adequate for whoever's living there. Because it's going to be that long before they have any distribution points or other resources available.
Well, I totally agree with that, because I think that the 3-day thing that FEMA and Red Cross and Homeland Security put out is crap. And I think 14, I don't want to go beyond what's recommended, because, people take what I'm saying and they compare it to what the other groups say, the real groups say. But I agree with them. 14 days would be the best thing to do. I also think if you live in the city of Seattle, there's a decision to be made. If you're going to be out of resources like that for that long, you've got to make some decisions whether it's safe to stay in the city and retreat. Because, people without food, money, shelter, power, etc., for more than 5 days in certain parts of the city becomes a dangerous place to live. And so you may have to decide, if you live in those areas, whether you're going to stick around. Again, you can see on the right, other things, medications. You use CPAP like I do. Your bathroom strategies, money, safety measures, lighting, warmth, and first aid. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that, by the way. Here's the core kit at my house. You can see I have a commercial kit. It's just easy, but I've also, 5 days of freeze-dried food. That's in addition to all the other food that I'm going to take out of the house. So if I'm working on my house, I have a lot of bulk storage. So there's more, I'm reaching into this stuff afterwards. I also have Coast Guard survival bars for 5 days above that, which is the last thing. If I have to eat those, I'm pretty much down to getting ready to eat salamanders and frogs. So extra bottled water, medications. It was mentioned pets. What's your emergency response for pet food, for pets? Plastic sheeting, duct tape, rope, and more. 24-hour candles. These are just some of the things that I have in 24-hour candles. Really cheap to get. Go to Safeway and other stores. You'll find them in the kosher aisles. Or Novena candles, or what are called Yortzad candles. All are 24-hour or longer candles, and they're cheap. They don't have to go to some special store to get to them. Speaking of bathrooms, yeah, I'm going to go there because it's a concern that oftentimes we overlook about bathrooms during disasters. So here are some of the things to consider. Yep, you can see this is nice because the survival package in this picture has a toilet lid on it. And you can see it actually is built to be a toilet. I have in my car for car camping and emergencies. If I'm car camping, I have one of these. It is logistically a little bit more challenging than using a regular toilet. I can tell you that. Have kitty litter available. There are different substances you can put there. Clumping kitty litter is one. There's another one that redwood stuff that I don't remember the name of it. Urinals. These are gel pee bags. You can pee in them, and they have a gel that takes up the urine, and you can close the bag and throw it away. Diaper wipes, toilet paper. But yeah, you got to think about how you're going to go to the bathroom, how you're going to get rid of the waste in that situation. Think about how much waste is going to pile up at your location, given 3 to 5 days or 14 days, whatever the infrastructure that's lost. So if you lose the infrastructures for a few days, you're going to have stuff like this piling up. So you have to think about that. Are you going to bury it? Are you going to, make sure you're far enough away from water supplies and things like that? So give these all considerations. And I think this is one that people often don't talk about in those emergency lists. They'll say have toilet paper. They don't say what happens if you don't have a bathroom. Not everybody wants to dig a hole and squat. Some people would prefer something a little bit differently. So you got to think about these things. Items often overlooked. Clothes. What happens if you no longer have access to a change of clothes? Think about that. A lot of people, there are not a lot of lists I've seen that actually talk about, hey, how many days worth of clothes you need to have on hand? No, you're not going to change your clothes every day, but you need to have some things that'll keep you comfortable. Babies and children, what do you need for babies and children? Well, first, books, games, and a life without computers. Wow, they're going to go into culture shock the minute they lose power for some of these kids. Diapers, a year's supply of mac and cheese, whatever you need to keep these kids occupied and helping out. What do you need to do to support the disabled? What do you need to do to support people who are elderly who need help? And of course, as was mentioned, pets. What are you going to do to help your pets? By the way, you won't be able to take a pet to a shelter. There will be, in some cases, pet shelters set up by the county, but you cannot take a pet to a shelter unless it's a guide dog type of thing. So you have to have what are you going to do with your pets? And do you have enough food for the pets? Do you have first aid supplies for your pets and things like that? So those are some of the things you want to also consider in this kind of, what seems like a simple question. Let's have food and supplies on hand for 3 or whatever days. But there are other things you have to consider as you go along that make it a little bit more complex than that simple question. That's the way it's simply answered oftentimes. So another few handy things to have, handy friends to have around. Most of us have a lot of this stuff around. 6 mil sheeting, really handy to have around. Build a shelter, build a solar still, do a lot of different things with this, use with the sheeting. Self-sealing silicone tape, not only good for radio stuff, but good for fixing leaky pipes, for example, and other things. Duct tape, of course, is a universal fix-it-all. Can't leave home without it. Cling wrap, really important stuff to have. Cling wrap. It's very handy for not only for first aid, but it's handy because it can wrap stuff up really quickly to keep it waterproof or watertight. It can withhold, usually depending on the type you get, it can at least handle 300 or so degrees, which can be very handy to have. I used to use a lot of this stuff in some of my industrial work. And rope, different types. You can have Dacron, jute, cotton, nylon, and other nylon types. Why you don't want to use expensive rope, jute and cotton are good things to have for wrapping something up really quick and making it tight. And it's easy to have big rolls of it and cut up for what you need. This kind of stuff that you see in the picture are great, but oftentimes, you're you're not going to cut this up to wrap up small parcels. It's good for other things. And also remember, it's nylon-based rope, so you want to use matches when you cut it to seal off the ends so they don't start fraying and coming apart. And of course, having basic hand tools as well. If you have a Radio Go kit, most likely you have basic hand tools with your Radio Go kit. That counts, right? So if my Radio Go kit, which is in the car, part of it is in the car, there's a tote with hand tools in it that stays in the car at all times. Why? Because it's part of my layered response. Some of my response is out of my vehicle. If the house is not available, at least the vehicle's available. And so I can augment one or the other. Getting the message out. When that material hits the fan, you want to know your family and friends are safe and need help. They want to know if you're safe or need help. So we have to have a family communications plan. Outside the region central contact, really important to have. They can post a private social media group, text, or email. Okay. GMRS repeater cable, mobile, or HFTs for local family contacts. One of the things I'm thinking about right now is buying my son, because he lives in Puyallup, and his wife, a GMRS radio with repeater capability, and then using, I know there's one local GMRS repeater, and I need to investigate that a little bit more, but you can have one license that covers the entire family in different locations. And it gives you a way of having at least some contact with the family, at least line of sight, but with a repeater on our GMS repeater, then you have more. Obviously, I don't tell you guys the advantages of that. What about bringing phone patches back for repeaters and landlines nearby, if they have landlines available? What's wrong with not having a phone patch on your phone, on the repeater again? Because if you need to make a phone call outside the area to tell your non-region contact, central contact, that you're safe, how are you going to do it? Well, maybe we should think about bringing those phone patches back, or something else. WinLink, of course, which is our email service, email to SMS or vice versa. And what other ways that we can, think about other ways that you can make sure you can communicate with family members. There's always the national traffic system, which is a helpful thing. It's still available, still comes online once a day or twice a day. Should we, as Mike and Key, consider as part of MCOM and Preparedness, putting up a GMRS repeater for the club members, so that we can offer to our friends and to our family members in different areas of the region where the GMS repeater could cover, the way that we can all contact each other's family members, our family can contact us and vice versa. Should we, as part of MCOM, for our group, think about a GMRS repeater for our team? And also, by the way, if you've got handhelds, think about whether you need to have AA battery, think about getting AA battery adapters for your HTs. Because oftentimes when you're trying to get your batteries, find a way to charge your HT after you exhausted the battery, you may want to have AAA batteries or AA batteries, depending on your HT, available to use, at least to do short range communication. You won't be able to get the full range out of that HT potentially on simplex, but at least you can get something local to talk to each other as family members, point to point, while you're using your batteries or monitoring the repeater, whatever you want to do. So think about what's the operable thing here is the communications plan is really important for you to ease the tensions that you're going to have, or family members' tensions they're going to have when there's a disaster, not knowing where everybody is and how they're covered. A few helpful apps, human and pet first aid apps you can get them on the Android and for the iPhone. Home safety planning, highly recommend. The Army Survival Manual online in your app, very handy to have. It could be, got a question, there it is, on how to do anything you want. Do a disaster plan for your church, synagogue, mosque, HOA, or apartment building. Really important. What's your church's response in a disaster? What's their role? How much stock do they need to deal with for their needs for their first day? Are they going to be a shelter? If they're going to plan on being a shelter, they should call the Red Cross to get help with that. If they have a kitchen, should it be a propane kitchen rather than a natural gas kitchen? Because you may lose the natural gas supply or it be compromised. What size generator do you need to operate that facility? Do you need medical supplies on board to support the members? How much water should you stockpile? Can you provide space for members to store 24 hours worth of items for their families to extend their own storage capabilities? These are all things to consider. And include also, of course, boats, which are basically, as I said before, they're floating RVs. So think about what's the disaster plan for your boat. And before we close, as we come to the close, is a few last slides. One, don't panic. and carry a towel, if you know where that comes from. These are what this is really pointing out is that you don't think of single-use items. You think of an item that can be used for multiple ways. So here's a towel being used for multiple ways from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And of course, if you're a Doctor Who fan like myself, the scarf was a key thing in How to Survive as well. So think about, it's not a single use item you want. You want something that can do as multiple uses as possible because stuff takes up space and costs. So some researches, I won't go into some research to start your research to into this area. Here they are. They'll be available in the presentation. Obviously, as I said before, don't forget to protect your legal documents. Here's a non-exhaustive list of MCOM groups in the area. And with that, I'm going to say, I ran through it fairly quickly, but thanks for listening. And I'll just open it up now for any questions or comments or experiences that anyone wants to share.
I'd like to make a comment or two, if I may.
Sure.
Hi, this is Carl from Seattle, and I do a similar presentation for the Office of Emergency Management, they call it. In Seattle, they have the SNAP, Seattle Neighborhoods Actively Prepare program. Any place else in Washington State, you're going to find Map Your Neighborhood, MYN. Both are programs designed to get you and your neighbors organized with each other to work collaboratively, preparing for and following a disaster. I encourage everyone to get involved with their neighbors and do family preparedness, then do your community block neighborhood building preparedness, etc. Great presentation, David. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other comments, experiences, questions?
David, the point you made about moving your files and stuff to your second floor, that's something that is one of the things that I was pretty prepared, and that was a good one that I went, oh, I actually have our safe is on the first floor, which if we had a flooding issue would be floating with the fire safe. But that's a good one. Thank you.
You don't necessarily need a very large disaster in order to use some of these supplies, because my septic tank failed last year, and when they came in to switch us over, we had to have 1 day of local potty training.
Yep. That's right. You never know. Again, we're talking about the big one in a lot of respects, but remember, it's about micro to macro, and also one of the things to keep in mind is when you have emergency supplies is at least once a year go in and rotate them. That is, check their dates. The nice thing about my emergency food in my car is that it's part of my camping supplies. So when I go camping, I'm actually using the stuff out of the emergency kit and restocking it backwards. So think about for that. When I took search and rescue training as a kid, one of the things they used to tell us is put food you don't normally eat. They used to say herring, kippered snacks, Vienna sausage, put things in your emergency kit that you won't eat in the middle of the night because you're hungry when you're not deployed. But when you're deployed, you get hungry, you're going to eat anything. All the things they listed were things I regularly eat, like kippered snacks and herring and things like that. So it's like, okay, I need the stuff I would never eat.
You can't win.
You can't win, right? So but think about that. You need to think about all those things. It's an active program. Other questions, comments?
I have a question on
Sure.
home generators. And what would the minimum wattage for a generator be to run, like the fridge, stove, furnace, and some lights? Does anybody have a experience as to what size generator would be needed?
So
Yeah.
Carl, when we had the snowstorm and we lost power here, I went and purchased the Honda 2000, and that was good enough to keep the refrigerator going, a small microwave that we had in our camp site, and our LED TV. And yeah, so the Honda 2000 would be a great starter. I know those are fairly pricey, but you definitely get what you pay for with the Honda there. It's been really a great unit. I
That can
would
run your
like to,
furnace?
so what I also did was I rewired my furnace because I have gas furnace, but you need the electricity to run the fan. So I
Yeah.
jumped on that, and the minute we had the heat in the house, boy, it made everything life a lot easier.
So you're
And,
saying,
and consider that you don't need to run everything simultaneously.
Correct.
So if you
True.
want to run the whole house simultaneously, you're going to need 6 to 10 kilowatts. But
Right.
if you carefully, you run the freezer for a while, keep it cold, don't open the door, run the fridge for a while, keep it cold, don't open the door a lot,
Yep.
run the furnace for a while to have a minimum level of comfort heat, etc. So you're rotating between the items that draw an amount of power. The stove, that's a bigger demand. So
Yeah.
if you have an electric stove, 2 kW is not going to run maybe one burner at a time only, not the oven and other stuff. So you got to be real careful
Right.
as to what load you put on it. The other thing is, how are you going to get the electricity from the generator to those items? Don't backfeed your house system.
Yeah.
Have an interlock
Ex-
switch designed to switch between generator and house if you want the power through your house electrical. Otherwise, just run extension cords.
Yeah, that's what we did.
Yeah.
Keep it simple with an extension cord, get a good heavy duty extension cord. We also bought a little hot plate, so if we wanted to warm up some soup, we could do that. But we found that just having a small microwave, a very low wattage, it was good enough to warm a couple of deals of soup and stuff. And the biggest thing was having the forced air heating rewired. That made life a lot easier.
what do you mean rewired?
Well,
So
go
we
ahead.
just rewired the fan so that the gas heater would run the fan okay.
There was an on-off switch at my furnace for the
Right.
electrical power to
Yep.
it. I took
Yep.
the switch out, I put an outlet in and put a plug on the end of the cord that went into the furnace. So normally it's plugged into that outlet. If I need to cut power to the furnace, I can unplug it instead of flipping a switch. But
Yep.
this way I can also plug it into an extension cord from the generator. So the fan in the furnace is running to blow the warm air through the house.
And that's the thing to consider is that, do you, as they're alluding that one, are you going to want to have a generator permanently wired to the house and then you're going to use a transfer switch to keep it safe? And you're going to have a process where you turn circuit breakers off, you turn the mains off, you turn circuit breakers off, and you begin turning on the circuit breakers. You're going to want to power off the generator before starting the generator. The other is to not wire it permanently into the house, so to speak, and then you use extension cords to distribute the power from the generator. For me, I'm thinking about a generator right now. And one of the things I've decided is I would rather use my camping gear for cooking outside than to have a generator big enough to use my oven or my stove. And so that's a decision I'm making, is that I'm going to make that choice. The other thing is, remember that's not just the wattage of those items, it's their surge with their motors. What's the surge current that you also have to prepare for? And so you really need to take out those items, look at the panels on those devices, how much power does each one have, calculate that all up to decide which ones you're going to operate all simultaneously, what's the excess capacity you want to have for safety and surge capacity. And that's how you decide, and what kind of fuel source you want to use, where do you want to store that fuel, and where do you want to make sure that that generator is properly vented to, et cetera. You want to work all those things out. And you'll find a lot of resources online for doing that. And of course, put it out to the group's IO page, because there's lots of experience in the club of using generators.
Yeah, since our house was a lot older, I ran down and went the extension cord route, because there was just a few circuit breakers and it was like the entire side of the house or all of the lights, or they had runs that it just didn't split out really easily.
I have the same problem.
So
Okay.
I just decided to go with the extension cords.
Any other
well,
questions?
I had an easier way. Yeah, I guess I'm open. I got a 6-circuit transfer box, and those circuits I can transfer in my 2000 watt generator. So I've got the furnace and the refrigerator and the lights in the kitchen and the lights in my bedroom, and the shack. But that has turned out to be really convenient now.
Yeah.
I parked the generator outside in the morning and I pull it back into the garage in the evening because I want it there the next morning.
Yep.
Yeah, and again, remember, you want to prepare for flexibility and versatility, because you need to remember that there may be a situation where you cannot live in your house. So what's your solution then? So have that in mind. Any last questions or comments or experience that anyone wants to share or ask?
One last comment on generators. Use stable in the fuel
Best.
and run them, take it out and start it every month and run it. Otherwise, when you need it, you're going to be pulling it for 20, 30 pulls and frustrated and worn out and have a heart attack. So yeah, maintain it.
Yes, I agree. And I'll leave you with kind of something that we did at the Red Cross, and I credit Lynn Burlingame and Roland Bash as the two ones behind it. I helped them out. But we had a great discussion, and they came up with one of the things we looked at is when we were doing emergency communications vehicle for the Red Cross for Seattle, we had some rules of thumb that I think is really important for anyone involved in income. One is, don't make it an RV. Don't have it as an RV. Why? Do it as a trailer. Why? Because one, you have now tied up a vehicle that can only do one thing. So I can tow a communications van somewhere, drop it, and use that vehicle for many other things and I can use the, whatever motor pool it's coming from to maintain it. Second thing is, because the Red Cross's mission was to operate out of a shelter, the trailer was more of a storage unit than it was an operating unit, because it didn't make sense for us to tie all of our stuff up inside a trailer when the HQ would be inside of a building. So everything was portable to be moved into, and then the trailer became an antenna platform we can mount antennas to and run coax to. But what if we couldn't get the trailer close enough? So what we did was, everything, if you look inside, is in a Pelican case, and you can deploy everything into the field from a Pelican case. We lost the repeater. Great, take this Pelican case with a car. Here's the antenna that goes with it. Here's everything. Drive up to Newcastle or wherever we have and put that repeater back online and camp out up there if you need to. And so everything was set up so that we could deploy it in different pieces in different ways, rather than being fixed into a unit. So that's what I mean by making sure that you size what you need to what you're trying to accomplish, maximizing your flexibility and resiliency. If we had mounted everything in that vehicle, we would have limited our response capabilities. And so just consider that from the micro level to the macro level. Anyway, thank you again, everybody, for letting me. It's been a while since I've given this presentation, so I'm a little rusty, but usually, again, been lately doing more radio talking stuff. But thank you very much for allowing me to present today. And if anyone has any additional comments or things to share, go to those groups that we just started and begin contributing, because it's good stuff. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. Now I have a lot of work to do.
Thanks, David. That was great. If you'd be willing to share that presentation, that slide deck, shoot over to me. I'll get it posted up on our different groups IO pages. But boy, that was really helpful. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you.
Why don't we take a 5-minute break? I've got 11:03 on my clock, so let's come back at, let's say, 11:08 to start the business side. Phil, does that work for you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.